Hey, on this episode, I have with me Shon Rowan. Shon is a OBGYN with a specialty in infertility. He has three kids, ages from 6 to 16, with one girl sandwiched in the middle of two boys. And he's been married for 9 years. Welcome to the Brotherhood of Fatherhood podcast, Shon.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate you bringing me on here today.
Yeah, so we actually, well, it's my pleasure, first of all. I asked you about this a while back. And I don't think you were quite ready, but you reached out and I know you are ready now. And for those of you who have not done so yet, before you listen to this episode, you got to stop. Just like put this whole thing on pause. I've never told anybody this again. I'll probably never say it again. You got to stop and you got to go back to December 2nd episode with Jeff Giosi. And that is an incredibly impactful episode. Listened to it a few times and had interviewed Jeff on another podcast I did and was just blown away by the man. I got to know Jeff through another business. Jeff, Shon, our guest today, is brother-in-law with Jeff Giosi, and Jeff passed away just recently. So we're going to kind of dive into that. Super excited to have you, Shon.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. Never a topic I thought I'd be a expert on, but here I find myself. Just you and I talked back and forth a few times just about vulnerability and weakness and how that looks as a man and things in our lives that shape us. And I tell you, the last 8 weeks from Jeff's passing to now, I've had that whole gamut of emotions, and man, did I feel vulnerable. And I just hope that my experience can help some of the other men out there when they go through similar losses. Just like I said, not something you'd ever think you'd go through, and then literally in a heartbeat, life changed.
It's really crazy to say this, and I've had to kind of explain it multiple times as I've talked to people about Jeff. As I've talked to people about his wife Sarah and how she's handled his sudden passing. When you explain Jeff, he literally was one of those guys. He was literally one of those guys that left a massive impact on people. I know we say that about a lot of people, but at his age, the impact he left is probably bigger than most lead in a lifetime of 70, 80, 90 years. And I mean that from the like a year and a half or 2 years that I knew him. It was absolutely overwhelmingly obvious. In fact, I remember the first conversation I had with him online. We were chatting. I talked with him in a sales call, but I was chatting and I said, dude, like you need to be in my brotherhood group. I said, you just, there's something about you. And I said, are you father? He's like, yeah. And from that moment on, the depth was like there. And it was just, it exudes outside of him. I don't even know how to explain it. But when I interacted with Jeff and his wife, Sarah, they just exude excellence. They exude building or lifting others up and breathing life into other people. So it's a real honor to be able to talk with you and learn the lessons learned that Jeff has taught you through his life and passing.
Yeah, I think a great example of the type of person Jeff was how he worked out. So Jeff was almost undoubtedly going to the CrossFit Games this year. I mean, he was just an amazing athlete. He was 40 years old. He was training in a very unusual situation for him. He was actually training in the gym with people. So Jeff almost always trained alone or with me or one or two other people. He really kept it to a very small group. And part of that was his passion for other people. He wanted to celebrate the 300-pound person who, for the first time in 10 years, was able to jump rope or was able to make that box jump. To him, that's what fitness was about. That's what life was about, celebrating those people. And that he was kind of, he was proud of his achievements, but he didn't want that to be what he was known for. And, when you talk about how he just uplifted other people, that's really how he lived his life. And January 23rd, it's a day that I'll never forget. He was at the gym training for CrossFit Games, with the CrossFit Open currently going on right now. was doing Dirty Diane, lifted a deadlift, and he fell over. And I just, it's one of those things you'll just never forget. And so many things just happened beautifully that day. Not that death is ever beautiful, but given the circumstances, I was at home working out myself, and for whatever reason, my 6-year-old was hanging out with me downstairs while I was working out, playing on my phone. And he's like, "Oh, Daddy, somebody's calling you." And I was like, "Oh, just let it go. I'll answer when I'm done in the middle of a workout." And he answered it by accident. And I could just hear my sister's voice going, and my sister doesn't panic, but it was a little bit of a panic there. It's like, "Nikki, where's your dad? I need him now." And I'm, "What's going on?" And she was like, "Jeff passed out of the gym and they're doing chest compressions." And here I am, I have a medical background. I'm like, wait a minute. One of the fittest men in the world doesn't get chest compressions. What is going on here? So I was like, "What do you want me to do?" And she's like, "I don't know. I don't know what to do." So I ran upstairs and left the house. My wife saw me running. She said I was just pale as a ghost, and I was like, ran out the door. She's like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "They're doing chest compressions on Jeff. I don't know." I got to the gym as fast as I could. It was just one of those times that I just couldn't find peace. I prayed. I started to pray, but then I even stopped because later on, just to jump forward a little bit, my brother called me after I'd left the gym, and he was like, "What can we do?" And I said, "Well, I would tell you to pray, but God knows our heart now, and I think what's going to happen is in God's hands, and something beautiful will come of this. And I think a lot of beautiful things are going to already start to come of this. And you just always left with that question of why. And I can come up with 100 reasons why. None of them, none of them are good enough for me, but I can think of lots of reasons. And I think part of it is exactly what you said. He accomplished more in 40 years than most people do in 80. And I got to thinking, if Jeff died when he was 80, how many lives would not have been touched? Because like you said, Jeff's death touched you. And I've had people reach out to me and say, "You know what? I've never met him, but just reading about him and seeing about him, my life is changing in this moment." And now we're just seeing this legacy and this, I kind of, one illustration I used was Jeff had built this fire and it was burning, and we all loved this beautiful fire, but we all kind of carried our own logs around because we didn't need to put our logs down. Jeff had this fire, right? And if our logs got too heavy, we knew Jeff was there to help us carry them. But now we all have to start our own fires, and I'm seeing that. I'm seeing so many people like, "You know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this," and they're reaching out and they're making impacts. So I think his legacy is just beginning, really. After 40 years of starting those fires, now we all get the chance to spread them. And yeah, so just back to that day, I got to the gym. It usually takes me about 15 to 17 minutes. I think I looked back at the time later. I got there in about 7 or 8, which probably was not not an ideal way to drive. But I got there, and all the way there, I kept thinking, "Man, I'm gonna have to go convince this idiot to get in the ambulance." He vasovagaled, and I can't believe this. He's gonna be stubborn, and I just can't wait to, I'm gonna have to convince him. And I got there, and it just wasn't that situation, And I think one of the things that got me most was one of the gym members. So there was a class going on, which, like I said, was unusual that Jeff was working out at that time. Later on, one of the gym members told me, he said, "I lost it when you walked in." He said, "Because you just had this look on your face like you were going to fight the gods to bring him back. Nothing was going to stop you from saving him." But that wasn't the plan, and literally in that heartbeat. So for people that don't know, Jeff had an undiagnosed thoracic aortic aneurysm, which is unusual at his age, and it just let go, and that was it. There was no saving him, and that's where we are, And then going from there to coming home and just completely losing it, and my wife trying to be supportive. She's like, "You don't know yet. You don't know. He might still be okay." And just getting to the hospital and just seeing the doctor just shake her head and knowing that it was done. And it just started me down this journey, of just feeling so vulnerable immediately, a vulnerable and a weakness that I had never felt in my life. Like literally, I can think of 3 times that day, from the first time I came home to pick up my wife and just collapsing on the floor, and 3 times I can remember later that evening, just twice, just collapsing and just feeling that weakness, and you and I've talked a few times about that vulnerability and what that means, and that, especially as a man, how it feels to feel that way. But I think I learned so much through it, and I hope that sharing my experience, I can help some others who will go through something or are going through something like this.
Yeah, we've had multiple guests on the show, including Jeff, who talked about death, and and I think it's something men think about a lot. And I know you're going to talk about this, but I think so often we prepare our preparation is in our own passing. And here you are with someone that you were very close to, it's your sister's husband, and an amazing person, and just, stripped from your life in an instant, stripped from your sister's life in an instant. Mm-hmm. And then the conversation that came up that between you and me was vulnerability, and just being open to the fact that as men, we have pain and we can't do this alone.
Yeah.
So how long did it really take for you to kind of settle into that? I know that, a lot of it's probably a blur. It's just 8 weeks, but
yeah, at times it's a blur. At times it seems like yesterday. Sometimes it seems like forever. Sometimes even just this morning at the gym, talking to my sister and her talking about some things that were going on, and just sitting there going, wow, wait a minute. He really is gone, and Jeff and I had a unique relationship. Jeff had lots of friends. He had lots of people in his life, and being a brother-in-law, we had a different bond, but we also were really close friends. And me, him, my wife, and my sister had a group on WhatsApp, and we messaged all day, every day about silly stuff. The four of us were really close, and it really hurt bad. We lost a brother and a friend, and that was a really tough thing to do. At least I would say at the time of his death, outside of my wife, he was probably my best friend. Now, I do want to say too, a little off topic, but my wife is my best friend, and Sarah, my sister, was Jeff's best friend, and just 100% sold out for each other. Just we're soulmates. And I truly believe that if your wife isn't your best friend, that's the first step you need to make in life. You need to figure out how to make that happen. Everything else falls in line. When it comes to struggles, when it comes to money, when it comes to even if your wife is truly your best friend, things like infidelity would never even cross your mind, right? So friends are forever, and we often in our society don't look at spouses as forever. But once you make your spouse your best friend, it's forever, and that. And I think that, to me, was the most important thing, to have my wife there for me. But it also was one of the hardest things, because I know that Sarah and Jeff's bond was beyond that of a normal couple too. I mean, they truly had that soulmate mentality.
Sometimes I think that I forget that that's not the case with everybody. My wife and I have been best friends since the day we met, literally. And it just grows, 25 years of marriage, it just continues to grow. And I wish that so much for every man. And then I realized that it takes work, and it can't be a wish. It's got to be work. And I love that you brought that up, because I think it's imperative for marriage, for kids, for raising kids to adults, to show that, to model that, and to live that. And I could tell that with Jeff and Sarah. I could absolutely tell that.
And I'm not a big Facebook poster, but I posted a few things after Jeff passed. And it's one of the things I put on there was kind of almost a note to him, and said, Jeff, I'll teach your kids how to play baseball. But one thing that I really need to do, is teach your kids how to love a woman the way you love my sister. So now that, that's on me, because we spend a lot of time together. Now we spend even more. My sister comes over 2 or 3 times a week, and we go over there. So now we have a 1 and 3-year-old nephew who, I'm kind of the man in their life now. And how I treat my wife is going to be an example to them. And I got to keep that in mind, and how I treat my kids, and how I treat them. So I got to kind of be a little harder on them. That was one thing my sister got on me for. She's like, Shon, you got to quit being so kind to them. Like, you got to yell at them. Because one day Arlen had grabbed a marker and wrote on the floor at our house. And I was like, it's okay. She's like, no, it's not. You can't be like that. You got to be hard on them. So I have a lot of lessons left to learn. But I think you asked how long did it take me to kind of start to lose that haze a little. I think after 33 days, I realized that I went a day without crying. So on day 34, and then I wanted to cry because I didn't cry. And I'm not a crier. I'm not a real emotional person. Well, I wasn't. I've kind of shifted a little. But yeah, it was about 33 days that I didn't cry, and I've cried many days since then. And like I said, I think we mentioned it's been 8 weeks, but every day got a little bit less, and the tears changed. In the first day after, I remember the sun coming through the window, just thinking, what in the world? Like, how in the world is the sun up? Doesn't it know Jeff Giosi died? Just like, what is going on? Why is the world still moving? But it does. And I think that's an important thing to remember, is that life isn't going to stop. So you've got to feel the pain, but you also got to know that life isn't going to stop. And I think one of the biggest things that I learned from this too was the first time my daughter saw me cry. I think I'm trying to think back if she'd ever in my life seen me cry. I think the first time she saw me cry was when we sat him down on the couch when I got home after it was confirmed that Jeff had passed, and we had to sit down and tell him. And it was really hard for my 6-year-old, harder than I anticipated, because he's kind of just a fun, loving, kind of goofy, just has fun kid. And he just stared at me like you're lying. He didn't say it, but you could just see in his face, like, you're lying. And I'm like, and then finally he just started crying. And later on I found out why. It's because when we had left to go back to the hospital, my wife's sister had come over to watch them, and he had prayed, and he wasn't sure how to pray. So he drew a picture. He drew a picture of his interpretation of Uncle Jeff, and then just put little hearts and crosses around it. And when he found out that Jeff had died, he just didn't understand. He's like, it's not possible that he's dead, because I prayed that he wouldn't be. And in the faith of a child. And how do we then restructure that, but make sure that he doesn't lose that faith? And that was a tough thing. And I would say it was a good week and a half that he didn't say nighttime prayers. Because usually we would say prayer, and he said the most beautiful prayers. And for a 6-year-old, it was amazing. It wasn't a scripted prayer. He would actually pray what was on his heart. But for a week or so, he's like, I just not comfortable praying for a while. And that was tough. And it just took some time to say, that by the time he prayed, it was already done. God has a reason. And that was one of the hardest initial things, was to get the kids to believe that God had a plan. I think one of the other hardest things is I like to read my Bible twice a day. Before I even get out of bed, I open up an app on my phone. It's nice to have these apps on our phones now, and then I read a chapter, and then at night, right before I go to bed, I read a chapter. And I was in the book of Job, of all books, to be in when something like this happens. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it for a week or so. I wasn't mad at God, but I also just wasn't ready to read that book either. And that was a tough one. One thing I like to do, again, kind of going off topic here, is that I like to read the book of Proverbs a lot of times in the morning. And just kind of gives you that nice wisdom for the day.
Yeah.
I sometimes think, so let me ask you, Scott, if God had told you, so I think most people are probably familiar with the story of Solomon, but if not, God he said he could have whatever he wanted, and he chose wisdom, and then with that, God gave him riches. And what would you have chosen if God said you could have anything you wanted?
It's such an interesting question you ask, because I do the same thing. I read the Bible first thing in the morning. Well, I have a routine. It's almost first, but honestly, for the last 3 weeks straight, my prayer has been for wisdom. That's it. That's the request I have for me, and literally based on Solomon. And because I read through it, And I was thinking, we have all of these desires, all of these worldly desires, all of these things we want to achieve with our family, with our wives, travels and experiences we want to have, all those things. Well, what's the one thing that can get you there? It's following God and having wisdom. And so
Yeah.
that is, I don't know if that really answers your question, but that is,
No, it does.
the
Yeah.
prayer of my heart. And
Yeah.
it's so crazy that you bring that up, because I just recently read Job as well. And I even chatted with my wife about it the other day, because I do a thankful walk. I do 10 minutes of walking with gratitude, and just basically thank God out loud for the things that I have. It's how I start. After I read the Bible, that's how I start. Because then when I'm going into my prayer time while I'm walking, it's really hard to ask for a bunch of things after you've just given thanks for all these things. And it's really refocused me into, all I want is wisdom. I just want to, so I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my focus.
No, it answers it perfectly. And because it's something I kind of think about a lot. Is what would I have asked for? And I think wisdom was obviously probably the right answer. That's why it's in the Bible. But I sometimes think I would have just asked for peace too, peace no matter what the situation. Because if you can find peace in anything, then money doesn't matter. And I think with peace comes wisdom, because you have to be wise enough to understand how you have that peace. But I think definitely when you look at like the loss of a brother or a friend or even a parent, how do you find that peace in that moment? I think for us it was a little bit easier than other people. So about a year before Jeff died, almost to the day, I think it was like 3 weeks after that was a year anniversary of one of our gym members was riding a bike and was hit by a car and killed. And actually, Jeff did an amazing podcast on that. He and Sarah had their own podcast, potential podcast, and he did what's called a mindset minute, just talking about death. And I think in those situations, there's the whole anger emotion, which thankfully we didn't have to experience, because we were given the peace that this happened and there was nothing we could do. So I know it's kind of off topic. I just thought I'd get your opinion on what you would ask for, because I think wisdom and it's a great thing to seek,
and
especially in these situations.
And a lot of people don't have peace. And this is not on topic. I mean, not on script. If there was a script, there isn't. But it didn't come to my mind till now. When you lose somebody so close, a lot of people will say, "How can you believe?" We're sitting here talking about faith in the Bible and things that we believe. How can somebody believe in a God when something so horrible happens?
Yeah.
And that's something that, when you're talking about your son with prayers, and if I ask God, he's gonna make it happen. It's just not the way it works.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's that unanswered prayer thing that sometimes we don't understand, or hardly ever understand until it's eventually shown to us. It could take years, or maybe we never know. Yeah. Sometimes we just never know.
Yeah. Are you finding peace?
I am. Yeah, I am. And a lot of things really. Just another point I would want to make is something I call marking off my tomorrows. You know how there's that old adage, what's always coming but never gets here, and it's tomorrow. And I feel like so often there are things we want to do, but we'll do it tomorrow. And just like tomorrow, it never gets here. You just never do it, and then just kind of looking at those things that I've always said, well, I'm going to do that tomorrow. And one thing that you and I were just talking about before we started recording was I just got back from the gym coaching some classes this morning. So several years ago, I was at the Granite Games in Minnesota with Jeff. He was there competing, and somebody had walked by with a CrossFit Health T-shirt on. And he's like, "Oh, that guy must be a doctor." I was like, "How do you know?" He's like, "Because he has an MDL1 shirt on." I'm like, what in the world's that? Well, that's an L1 they did just for doctors. So I looked into it, and so I went and did it, and I got my level 1 of CrossFit. And I told Jeff, okay, now I got this. I can, now you can teach me to coach, and I'm going to coach some classes. And that's been 2.5, 3 years ago. I never coached a class. Well, after Jeff passed, I was like, you know what? It's time. And so now I coach 3 classes a week. It's the highlight of my day. except for on Wednesdays, it's not quite the highlight because I do the 5:30 and I don't like to get up that early. I don't know how you work out at 5:30 in the morning, but no, I do. I love it. I don't like getting up at 4:45, but I think that was one of my tomorrows was I was going to start coaching classes and I just love it now.
A lot of people do live in their tomorrows. I like your wording better than anything I've ever heard. Is marking off my tomorrows. A lot of people live their life in when this happens, or when I get to X, or when I make so amount of money, and that's a tomorrow. And
yeah,
honestly, you're never going to get there if that's the way
right.
you live. Yeah.
Yeah. And if one of the truly fittest, documented fittest men in the world can die in a heartbeat, we can too. We never know when that tomorrow is going to come, especially if those tomorrows involve other people. Make sure that you're not forgetting that tomorrow I'll do this for my kids. No, do it today. Get out and do it, or at least make a plan. And that's one thing I would encourage every man listening to this right now. Think about that thing that is your tomorrow and schedule it. If it's oh, there's a certain restaurant I'd love to take my wife to, call right now and make a reservation. Oh, I wanted to take my kid to some jump house or something. Call, make a point of it right now, put it on your schedule, and then it'll happen. Once you have it scheduled, it's no longer tomorrow, as long as you don't back out of it.
Yeah, honestly, Jeff's passing in there was this series of events. Jeff got on the podcast and talked about if I die, and I like the way he was leaving a legacy, the things he was doing actively, which is incredible that he was doing those things. I also had a few other guests that were, I can't live like I'm never going to die. I have to live like I'm dying tomorrow is the title of another podcast right after that. And I started, and then there was the tomorrow thing. Like, will you ever reach those things? And we were talking before this also about me leaving my profession. And one of the reasons my full-time job, one of the reasons I did that is because I was in a tomorrow mindset. I was always like, I'll get more time once I get this next thing stepped in place. And I was carrying all these torches and working super duper hard and all my hours and doing these podcasts. And then honestly, the catalyst was Jeff's passing. Was no, I can't live like this. My boys have been asking me to go snowboarding. They haven't we haven't done a family trip in over 2 years. Like, I haven't taken a vacation at all. And, we just spent the last week, we traveled to Idaho. We went I personally taught them to snowboard. They both crushed it. I had the best time with them that I've had in years because I stopped, and it's like, it can't be tomorrow. It has to be now. So there's your legacy right there. I mean, it's already caused action. It was a part of something that caused action, which was a life change for me. So now, I'm speaking what I'm going through, so other men can actually hopefully take a hold and carry in this path, because it's been so incredibly awesome for me. Is once I realized that the moments are fleeting and we can't wait on things. We should not wait on things. I took the steps necessary to buy myself some time. I took the steps necessary to make a way for it to financially work, which was a struggle. And then I stepped out in faith and did it. And now my mind is completely full of, how am I going to get them snowboarding? How am I going to get them to the beaches in Florida? How are we going to do these things that everybody wants to do? And there's no more excuses. And all that will propel your success. It will propel everything you do, because the focus is so much bigger than you. Now my passion and my goal, my purpose, but my immediate purpose is developing opportunities and experiences that I can have with my family. And that's a huge drive. It's a tremendous drive.
And what better way to shape your children to be the best that they can be, other than to show them that too. We're often so defined by our profession. And the best compliment anybody ever gives me is when we're doing something, they look at me like, you know what? I forgot you're a doctor. I'm like, yes, thank you. That's what I want. I don't want to be defined by that. Yet we're all defined by our jobs. And some people, especially in the medical field, and it sounds like in your career path too, is, this like hours and hours and hours, and sometimes to the point that other people are like, oh, I worked 48 hours straight, what did you do? And it's like you almost feel guilty for a minute, but my answer now is I spent time with my kids. Yeah, I went home and had dinner with my wife. Like, that's what's important, because we all have this idea and we want to be irreplaceable, but the second we're not in our job, we're replaced, and the job doesn't stop. I mean,
Right.
even think back, think about even last names, a lot of people's last names were their occupation, and people for many, many years have been defined by their profession. And I saw some of your pictures online of you snowboarding with your kids. And I had actually just started skiing this year. I only got to go twice, but loved it. And my son, who's 16, he had never got to go. So we got to go a few times. And I went the Saturday after Jeff passed, and no, it was the Sunday after Jeff passed. And just being on the ski slope all by myself and just in nature. I mean, that was just, to me, one of the most cathartic things I had done, and having those sort of moments.
Yeah, I had this conversation with my wife because I'm like, this is where my soul thrives, is when I have time to get out in nature and be face to face with it doing something hard, whether it's mountain
Yeah.
biking, hiking, skiing. I know I learned to ski too, snowboarding, in the elements. I don't know that all men get to experience it, but it's an absolute must. It is. I think
Mhm.
it's just a part of our inner nature, our masculinity, to like have that. It is cathartic to have that time where you are surrounded by nothing but um, the nature. I mean, and
Yeah.
you're there's no quiet, there's no interruptions, there's no technology, and it's just you. I call it my flow state. When I'm doing something like mountain biking or snowboarding, I'm in a
Mhm.
flow state. My brain is completely clear. And when I stop for a moment, every amazing thoughts come to mind. My creativity
Mhm.
is opened up. My productivity is opened up. Man, I got to get there like every week now.
Yeah.
Got to figure it
Yeah.
out.
For me, that space is the gym, just
Mhm.
working out or going for a run. I'm not a big runner, but even something like that was the first thing I did when we got home from the hospital. I told my wife, I got to go for a run. I didn't make it very far. It was kind of cold, but just I had to get out for a minute, get some of that energy out. And it's different for different people. I know my brother, his may be more woodworking or hunting. We all have our different avenues of getting out in nature or doing something with our hands. And it's just so important to have some sort of hobby that the only thing in your hand isn't a remote. And I think a lot of people resort to that, or alcohol. So that brings me to another point, about something I had learned in this journey, was to find that one or two people that are your support, that is just the person that you can reach out to and they can reach out to you. And that happened for me 4 weeks after Jeff passed. And excuse me. So like I was saying, Jeff didn't have a lot of people that saw him in the gym, but he had me and one other guy at this time, Kurt, in the last couple of months, that were kind of his support team through his CrossFit journey. And he would share videos with us almost every day of his workouts, what he was doing. So after he passed, Kurt and I kind of kept that up. And then Jeff's lifelong best friend, Kent, the three of us really formed a bond and kind of got together. But about the Sunday, so 4 weeks after Jeff passed, that next Sunday, they had been over my house and we drank a good bit. We killed a couple bottles of whiskey, and I had texted Kurt and I was like, I think me and you were Jeff's support. Let's continue that. It's or what? Let's still be that for each other. And he said, absolutely. And I said, one thing I'm going to need some support on is I don't have a problem, but I've drank 26 out of the 28 days since Jeff passed, and I don't want to go in that place. And he goes, all right. we're not drinking for 14 days. I was like, cool, starting tomorrow. And he's like, nope, we're starting right now. I was like, dude, I was like, listen, I think there's like 3 or 4 beers off my fridge. It'd be best if I just clear those out so I don't have to look at them. He's like, no, because here's what just happened. He's like, I just was getting ready to throw some burgers on the grill, literally just cut up a lime and had a beer sitting beside my hand, getting ready to open it when you sent that. And I just put it back in the fridge. So you're leaving those. That's part of the mental battle we're going to go through. 14 days, we're not touching alcohol. And that, Scott, was the most amazing 14 days. And when the 14 days was up, I was like, I don't even know if I want one now. It just wasn't, it was, and it wasn't even about the alcohol, I don't think, as much as just having a purpose, having a goal, having a person that I was going through those 14 days with, checking in on each other, and to me, that was the most important part of my journey so far. And that is when I think I really found my clarity. But it's not always even alcohol. You can find other addictions through this, whether it's gambling, or for some people maybe pornography. There's an outlet that people find that you just need to find, not let yourself go down that road, and to find that person that you can confide in that kind of keeps you there as your support.
Yeah, the third value in one of the core values of the Brotherhood is tribe. And that word can be a little overused, but the importance of having at least a person who is going to call you out, or set a line in the sand and just like, no, we're not doing that, or be honest with you. Someone you can be fully vulnerable with. I mean, getting back to the vulnerability.
Exactly. Yes.
It's so incredibly important. I think men have really do struggle with that quite a bit. They might have their college bros, or they might have their high school buddies, but a lot of times we get wrapped up in career, and that's the only people we know. And that's the last place you really want to be vulnerable. And so right. I really encourage men, Josh and I created the Brotherhood out of a very long reaching desire of mine to have a tribe. And really, it's like, if I can't find one I want to be a part of, I'll create one.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Been very happy about that. But what were you like with vulnerability? And speaking of vulnerability, prior to Jeff's passing, were you guarded? What's the growth been like?
Yeah, I think I was a pretty guarded person in general. I really kind of held my emotions to myself. I think my wife and a few other people were the only ones that ever kind of saw those emotions. I didn't let myself be vulnerable. Like I said, I think that was the first time my daughter had probably seen me cry. And I remember, just kind of thinking back now, that my uncle passed away suddenly about 3 years ago. And I remember looking at my mom at one point in there, and I said, you know what? I haven't seen Pap cry. And she goes, you won't. He'll cry in private. He'll cry, but you won't see it. And I got to thinking about that now that you just mentioned that, it's something that I think that we're kind of taught, because that era, especially, they were taught you don't cry. And no, I was not someone that would open myself up to vulnerability. It was an ongoing joke that, I don't like hugs. People wouldn't hug me. To the point that I actually have those little drink hugs. I have one of those on my desk at work. A patient brought that to me. She said, done a surgery on her, and she was like, I just want to thank you so much and give you a hug, but I know you don't like hugs. So she gave me a little hug drink. But that's one thing I do more now. I'm like, I tell people, like, okay, I'm open for hugs. So some people love that, because I think it's okay. It's okay to say I love you. It's okay to hug and to open yourself, because with that comes that possibility of vulnerability. And I think that's one thing my wife is actually struggling with, because she was the exact opposite. She loved to hug. She loved to say I love you. And now she finds herself not wanting to open up that vulnerability again. So we've actually kind of flipped roles in that a little bit, and it's actually interesting to see that play out.
That is really interesting. It's like you almost feel like you're a little inside of my head. Recently, I have a good friend who was on the podcast. It's Matt Chenard, and he's really into some really cool ideas. But he's like, the love language, the love languages. Have you taken the love languages test, Scott? I'm like, no, I've heard about it forever. Well, a little birdie kept popping in my head, my own mind kept circling back to love languages. And recently, I told my wife about it. We both took the test, and it's a little off topic, but one thing that I remember about it is, one, it changes. Your love languages change due to life circumstances, your growth. A lot of assessments, they don't, your results won't change, but it does change. Wow. I know it's a little off topic, but wow. Like I have these things that I am driven by, and,
Hmm.
acts of, um, like gifts is one of the things. My wife is one of her love languages, not touch, man, not touch. And that's hard for me because I'm high on the touch. So it's
Yeah,
so interesting to watch those, but I just want to encourage people to understand that we all have different ways that we're fueled, and that's okay. But with those closest to us, we really need to be in tune with it so that we don't get frustrated when there aren't words of affirmation given, and you are energized by words of affirmation. And
yeah,
then for men, I think specifically, like with your wife having this little bit of a shift, like if you can get that data, if you can get that information and find out really where her sweet spot is, or one or two top sweet spots for love language, which is, I've always resisted because kind of corny name, but if you can find those sweet spots, then you can start operating in those and putting your energy in those, because they're quite often different than we thought.
uh-huh.
And then, then you just even have a closer relationship. So it just sparked that memory for me, that is a changing thing based on
Yeah.
circumstances, based on life experiences.
I've heard of love language. I need to look at that myself. I
Dude,
didn't realize what you were saying about how it can change, and because I
yeah.
feel like mine has. I feel like I've changed.
Yeah. And
It's only been 8 weeks, so have I really truly changed? I don't know. I definitely know I have a different mindset.
it's a very profound experience, I would say, probably, and
Hmm.
it'll shift. But yeah, that love language test, it took me about a minute to find it at Google. It's free, and it's about 5 minutes to take it. And then my wife and I were like, wow. I mean, we had all sorts of conversations after it,
Yeah.
So just as far as long as, my encouragement for men is to lead your wife into doing that, so that you can communicate and fuel each other in a way that is more productive. It's funny, guys will try and buy their wives gifts and flowers because they want to, their ultimate goal, they're ready to get lucky or whatever. And then you take the test, you're like, dang it, gifts aren't part of her love. Like, I spent all that money and time.
Yeah.
All I need to do is rub her back.
Yeah. Or
So yeah.
gifts are a part and we're bad at it. Because that was one thing. Jeff and Michelle, my wife Michelle, they would make so much fun of me and my sister because they would put so much thought into all these gifts. Like our 9th year anniversary this year there's like the 9th year is some special wood, and she bought me a pen and a cold brew maker that had this special wood, and I think I got her like maybe some flowers on the way home. It's like they would make so much fun of us because they would put so much thought into gifts. So I obviously, if she's so intent on gifts being important for me, then I need to focus back gifts to her a little bit more too, I think.
Yeah. 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 We're not all of us are real good at this stuff.
No, no,
Yeah.
no. That was one thing Jeff was really good at, but no, not me. Um, but yeah, he left Sarah with a lot of amazing things, a lot of. So one thing she was just talking about this morning is every morning Jeff was he was one of those true people that could only sleep like 4 or 5 hours a day. I think they're called like super sleepers or something. And so he would stay up till like 1 or 2 in the morning. Then he would make coffee. Sarah would get up 4:30 in the morning, go do her radio show. And every day he would write on a little erase board there 2 or 3 sentences, really like a true like thought every day. Well, then after about a year and a half, she found out he had taken a picture of it every day for over a year. And I think for Christmas or just shortly before he passed, had made a book and had all of the pictures laminated. So it's still today, for the rest of her life, every morning she can get up and read uh, a, a quote or a saying from Jeff. I mean, it was just such a special bond and a little thing that, what did it take him? 15 seconds,
Right.
and now it's her life. It's the rest of her life. And he just, so many things that just left Sarah in such a great place. Like when when we were at the hospital, and I was I was just beside myself, and she was just sitting there, and I was like, man, my wife and I were like, she's just in shock. And later on, she was like, you know what, I wasn't. You guys thought I was. And one of Sarah's goals was to become a life coach. That's something she's been working towards, getting some different certifications and things. And the other day she was over here and we were talking about it a little bit more in depth. And I'll give her credit for this. And she believes that when it comes to holistic health, that there's 5 main buckets and then maybe a few minor buckets that we need to really try to keep full at all times: spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, and social. If we can keep those 5 buckets of our life at as good a capacity as we can every day, when we are hit really hard with something, we don't already have a deficit that we have to overcome. And that was her point. She's like, spiritually, I'm in a good place. There was a time in Sarah's life that she questioned God. She questioned the existence of God. And I think some people were like, oh no, is she going to go back to that? She's like, heck no. My faith is stronger now than it's ever been. But she understood why people would be questioning that. Mental health, with mental health, inside of that is your ability to process. And that also comes mental illness. Mental illness is real. And if you have it, getting proper treatment, being open to your best friend, who I believe should be your wife, about that, making sure that you're in check. Addiction falls under mental health, making sure that you're in a proper place mentally. Emotional health, how do you feel? Being able to cope with things, being able to show empathy, being able to cry, and having your emotions not be so stoic that you never feel emotion, but not so far on the other end that everything you do seems dramatic. Physically, getting into the gym, that was one of the first things she said right away. It was like, I have to fitness, several times a week. I got to keep my physical shape. And then, like you were saying, your tribe, social, you got to have that social group. I think it's important to have a bigger social group, but also within that group, have that 1 or 2 people that you can truly confide in. And if you can keep those 5 buckets full, when you do get hit by something, I think that your ability to respond, to cope, and to look at it in a proper light is amazing. And then the 3 kind of underneath of that, which could probably kind of fall in the other buckets, was professional, which I think is one that I think you're a living example of right now, making sure that your professional life is where it needs to be. Is it so taxing that none of your other buckets can be full? Or is it so not goal driven that you're not accomplishing anything and you don't feel a self-worth? I think it's a very tough middle ground to find there. Your family health, your family bucket. How is your family? Are you snowboarding with your kids? And sometimes those two kind of play in together. And then environmental, and I think that would go into proper diet, some nutrition things. I could go on for an hour on nutrition. I think it was so important to see and hear this from her, someone who literally just lost their soulmate, telling me, who lost a friend, but not anywhere near what she lost, being able to explain to me how to cope, you know.
She's just let's sit a minute on Sarah, because not long after Jeff passed, she put out a Facebook video, and I was
24
watching this
hours.
thing. Yeah, I was watching this going, she's in shock. I mean, like and
Yeah.
having chatted with Sarah, she was on a podcast. I had her as a guest on a podcast, and there was just always something a little extra.
Hmm.
She just real insightful. But I had a hard time believing she was in shock in that video. I'm like, this is just almost surreal the way she is acting, is what I was thinking. I showed it to my wife, and my wife's like, yeah. I mean, we were looking at that, and I'm like, she actually looks not in shock. She actually looks at peace.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many people can say this. So I think those 5 buckets are obviously working for her. I mean, I would think she'd be a phenomenal, absolutely crush it as a life coach, just from the little bit that
Oh
I
yeah.
have interacted with her. The other thing I want to say about Sarah is that I've had several interactions with her. I know she probably got thousands of messages after Jeff's passing, because he was so impactful in so many worlds. But she actually responded, and then she just sent me one the other day, and I was like, no matter, it's not about her. She's always uplifting. She said, oh, I've noticed this about you, I'm so proud of you. Or I'm like, okay, I think it's time for us to be supporting you, but cool. So that, I think that bucket mindset or way of living seems to be very powerful, and I would agree with it. Never thought of it
Yeah.
that way, but I would agree with it.
Yeah, I never thought of it either. And I look back at how I reacted. Because I told her, because then we were at my parents' house later that evening, and I kept sneaking back into the back room because it just kept hitting me. My God, this just really happened. And eventually, at one point, she came back and going back to just kind of like being that weird, not into hugs much. Like she came back and she held my hand and we held hands in the weirdest way. Like I was like, what are we doing? And I was like, wait, this is wrong. Like you're comforting me. I should be comforting you. And she was like, no, you don't understand how important it is for me to see you react this way. She's like, because knowing you and seeing you hurt is so impactful to me to know that Jeff really was that awesome, you know. And I think that's another point is like we sometimes think, oh, we got to hide our emotions. But here, me not being able to hide my emotions helped the person that I wanted to help in that moment more than anything. You know, I think Sarah's 8 years younger than me. We always tell the story about how when I was 7, I wanted a sister and I started praying for it. And there she was. So I literally prayed for Sarah, and even though we're 8 years apart, we've been very tight our whole lives. We were very close. I think part of the situation here was seeing my sister and continuing over, you know, the rest of my life having to watch, because this isn't something that ever just stops. You know, you don't just heal from it.
Right.
That was a tough thing to watch, but just seeing her strength has just been so inspiring, and I can't wait to see what she's able to do with this and help so many people. I think we're just scratching the surface of Jeff's legacy.
Yeah.
I wish he was here to see it. You
Yeah.
know, it's the worst way to have to appreciate these things.
Yeah. It is. It is. But I mean, we'd be remiss to just not live it out loud, not to shout it out loud. Jeff, the memorial, I mean, it's big. You guys, and there's a
Yeah,
memorial workout, and it's
yeah,
big, and it'll probably be done across the entire United States. I know
yeah.
that there's some big hitters supporting. You got Rich Froning supporting. You've got,
Hmm.
I'm sure CrossFit has reached out. I'm pretty sure CrossFit has
Yeah.
reached out.
CrossFit has reached out, and Eric Rose has even reached out and said he will be doing the workout. We have several people from the Masters Collective coming to our gym that morning. So
Yep.
I hope it's okay for me to promote it. It's
Yes, do it.
CrossFitMorgantown.com. Yep, CrossFitMorgantown.com/Jeff. And if you go to CrossFit Morgantown's public Facebook page, you can see the video that Scott was talking about where my sister got on live. It went completely live on Facebook about 24 hours after Jeff passed, and so impactful. I think last I saw it was almost 100,000 views. And she was
Oh,
like, wait, yeah, she was like, wait a minute. I did this video for 100 members, you know. And it
yeah.
was like, she's like, I don't get it. I was like, you don't get it. Like, your husband just died, and you gave this most amazing message for all of us. You know,
Yeah.
you started that torch. You lit your own fire immediately. You know,
Yeah.
it was
So
amazing.
for our listeners, what is the date for that workout?
So the workout will be April 10th. It's done through that website. You can go to a registration. It'll say on there 9th through the 11th, I think, because we did it over the weekend. We chose that because April 12th is Jeff's birthday. So April 10th will be the workout. We're having a big memorial here in Morgantown. And then there's a t-shirt on there. If you look down through, so there's two different things. You can go register for the event, which lets you pick. There's one workout, 4 versions to it. There's the elite, which is called Jeff. And then there's the more human version, because the
Yeah,
elite is
no
for
kidding.
what Jeff would call the mutants, you know, the people that are just on a whole nother level. So then there's the Sarah, and then there's the Arlen, and then there's the Mackie. So
That's
we have 4
awesome.
versions. It's yeah. I think it's a cool workout. I've done it. I did not do the elite. I did the second level down, and it's a good one. It's a fun one. Incorporated a lot of the movements that Jeff loved, including some of the ones that he was doing literally when he passed.
Yeah.
And then there's a second thing on that website, which is the T-shirt. The T-shirt, if you have take 10 minutes and read down through the meaning of the T-shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Colby from Box 13 here, I think he's in Pittsburgh, designed the shirt, and he and Jeff had a tight bond, and it's just the amount of thought put into that design of that T-shirt is just astounding. So I
So
encourage people to look at that.
I actually, when I got the message with the link for the workout and the registration and the shirt, I actually bought it while I was on the plane to my vacation. I'm like doing it now.
Yeah.
So that would be my suggestion. Hopefully that doesn't close before people hear this, but what a cool, I mean, what a great conversation starter. What a cool way to remember to,
Yeah.
you know, mark off your tomorrows.
Right. Yeah. Mark off some tomorrows. And so
Yeah.
for this year, any proceeds are going to a trust fund for the boys. They are 1 and 3 years old, so that they, can be supported in Jeff's absence. After this, there is creating a charity organization. I think it's going to be called Forgiven Warrior, because Jeff had 2 tattoos on his front along his rib cage. On one side was Forgiven, on the other side was Warrior. And we hope that this becomes more of an annual event, and then the money from that will go to her charity. And I'm not sure exactly, a couple different directions she's thinking about with that, but it's whatever it is, it's going to be an amazing organization, and one that I'm sure we will all be very proud to be a part of and support.
Yeah. They also had a GoFundMe. I don't know if that's closed yet, but considering the impact the loss of a husband has on a family, it was really cool to see that thing grow fast.
Yeah.
And furious. I hope it kept going. I think I finished it at, I don't know if it was close to 200,000 or something of
I
that nature.
honestly, yeah, I quit looking when it hit to about 150,000, because I was just
Yeah.
so overcome by the support, and it was a lot of small donations too. And that was, like you said, I think Rich Froning had given some, and CrossFit headquarters, and Sarah kind of, she had to laugh a few times. She's like, I just wish Jeff knew that these people knew who he was. All these people reaching out that
Yeah.
he idolized, and here they all were like, yeah, I know Jeff. We heard
Right.
about Jeff. It's like, wow. She's like, I just wish he knew. But that's one of the whys that I am able to settle into is, if Jeff had gone to the CrossFit Games, and his coach Jay and a lot of people were certain, he was going. He was going this year. But if he had gone, and this happened next year, would he have then been known as Jeff the CrossFit Games athlete? Because that's not what he would have wanted to be known as. Like where we sit now, he's known as the likely was going to be a CrossFit Games athlete, but look what he did. And I think on the other hand, he would have been Jeff the CrossFit athlete. Oh yeah, he also owned a gym and touched lives. And to me, that's a why that I can settle into. I would much rather have been, he was a 3 or 4 time CrossFit Game athlete that died when he was 80. But since
Right.
that's not the scenario,
Right.
I can find peace. Again, we're bringing up the word peace. I can find peace in the fact that he didn't go to the games. And so, like I was saying, he had that little group of just me, him, and Kurt. And when you talk about beautiful things that you can find in a horrible situation, so Jeff was really sick the week before. We actually thought he had COVID. He had pretty much, couldn't breathe real well. Looking back, it was probably this aneurysm starting to expand. And he had sent me and Kurt a text, I think it was on Thursday of that week, and he died on a Saturday, and said, I'm sorry I couldn't train harder for us this week, guys. Because we kind of formed this bond, like, we're going to the game. We're a team. I'm sorry I couldn't train harder. And we'd kind of messaged back and forth a little bit. And the last thing that Jeff sent on that group was a picture of shorts. He was very into designing t-shirts and shorts. That's why this t-shirt is so important, like every single detail. And he sent us a picture. He's like, look at these shorts. And he said, look at the waistband. And on the waistband, it said amor fati. And his last message to me and Kurt in that group was amor fati. I may not live through it, but I love my circumstances. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, come on, dude, you're going to live through it. Like, you tested negative for COVID, you know, you're feeling better. He'd sent a picture of him doing some like crazy shit at the gym. Like, you're going to live through it.
Yeah.
But that was the last message. I may not live through it, but I love my circumstances. And I think it's such an important thing to love fate. I have no tattoos. I've always wanted one, and I think I'm going to get one that says amor fati, and not just in his honor, but to remind me to love fate. You know, that our fate is written. How we get there is not. You know,
Right.
I truly believe that God knows the day we're going to die, but we have a lot of choices on how we get there. You know, are you going to get there as a hypertensive diabetic smoker, or are you going to get there as one of the fittest people in the world that touches lives? You know, and I think that we have those choices, and I hope that we look at things like Jeff's death and we decide to be that person that's going to touch lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, really, really profound conversation. From
Just one last thing I just want to leave people with. And one thing that Jeff said, and I think it's how he ended his podcast with you. Jeff had a saying, and if it wasn't really gone into depth on your podcast, on that Mindset Minute on Potential podcast, he went into how he came up with this. And Jeff always said, love like you will die tomorrow, but dream like you will live forever. And I now tweak that a little bit. And instead of saying love like you will die tomorrow, I say love like they will die tomorrow. Because you need to treat every person like that is your last moment with them, not their last moment with you. You know, we always think about, well, what if I died tomorrow? You wouldn't have wanted to say that to me, but what if they die tomorrow? And, you know, and just loving people, giving them that last hug, giving them that last I love you, not letting the sun go down on that, because you don't know when they are going to die. And when someone else dies, they don't have emotions, they don't have what ifs, you do. And we need to make sure that we don't have those, you know, make sure that emotional bucket is filled, and make sure that those what ifs aren't going to be there. There's going to be some, and you can't have that amazing relationship with everybody. But if you make a point that to try, I think you'll be better off when these situations do happen to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Love like they will die tomorrow, because it takes focus off of us and puts it on the people in your life that matter. And I think that's really the way that we should be living. Thanks for bearing your soul, your experience.
Yes.
It's not one I wish on anybody. And I know you guys have really been through a lot. One last reflection. This is the honest truth, and I didn't even know this until today. That Saturday that I found out Jeff had passed. Actually, I found out Sunday morning. We're getting ready for church, and that actual day was the first day my kids ever saw me cry. My boys.
Wow.
It hit me so hard. I can remember about 3 times I've cried in my adult life. And I just dropped. I mean, and my wife was just like, what happened? And my boys walked down. It was on the couch in our living room. It's kind of the central spot. And I just remember it profoundly, and realizing like I can't walk away from this. I can't go hide. Yeah. This is real. I'm not really in the mood to move. But that's the effect. Like, I'd never met him in person, but it dropped me to my knees. And that says a lot. And thank you for you and Sarah and Kurt and everybody, or Kent, right? Kent, did I say that right?
Kent and Kurt, both. There's 2 of them.
Okay. I was just going to say there was another. Okay. Just really kind of carrying that legacy. And that is definitely, you guys are definitely carrying the torch. If you're listening to this podcast, well, first of all, thank you, Shon. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me share this. It's very, very meaningful.
Good. I'm glad, because it is an absolute pleasure. But if you're listening to this, this is releasing before Jeff's event. So make sure you go on that page, and it's CrossFit Morgantown. And like at this point, grab a shirt and maybe do the workout if that's something that you do. If not, maybe you could try like one round of it because it is hard. I've looked at it. And but understand that you're contributing to something huge. Jeff put his heart and soul into leaving a legacy for his boys and his wife. And I just think that we all ought to carry that and move it forward and then do the same thing with our lives. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Brotherhood of Fatherhood podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends, your family, and follow us on social media. If you are a father, make sure you join our Facebook group, the Brotherhood of Fatherhood. Hit the subscribe button and tune in next time for more podcasts from the Brotherhood of Fatherhood.